Hi, everybody. Very glad to see you here tonight. I'd like to start off by saying that I apologize for last night. I guess I thought I knew how to set up a YouTube through the XSplit software, but I guess I did not know how. So I'm currently working with the XSplit folks to unsnarl my program. But until then, I'll be sticking with the commentary and analysis and the normal type of live stream I've been doing. So for tonight, I do want to start off by checking to see whether my sound is back to normal and whether you can see me okay. So, if you would be so kind as to give me a few comments about that, I'd be very happy to have them. Okay, what do you think? Is my sound okay? Hmm. Okay, I'm going to assume it is. Then, and I'm going to go ahead. Okay, so, oh, hi, Dolores. Glad to see that you're here. Can you hear and see me okay, first of all? Do I have any echoes tonight? Hmm. Okay, let's need to know if my sound is all right. Thanks. Hi, Lana. Nice to see you here tonight. How's my sound and how are the visuals? Everything okay? Oh, I also want to start by apologizing for my blue shirt. I did wear a shirt last night that was actually purple, but I guess it looked like a blue shirt, okay, to you. But tonight I'm wearing a much lighter true blue shirt. I have lots of other shirts, but I'm afraid they're all blue, except at least the shirts, the short sleeve shirts that I wear. Okay, are all blue except for one which is pink. Okay, and that one takes on a violet cast. Hi, Margaret Ames. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks now. So, okay, it looks like what Bernie tried to do. Uh, Okay, sorry, I should say what Warren tried to do was to get a march, okay, on Bernie by being the first one to answer the incessant, the absolutely incessant and persistent by questioning from the mainstream, how you going to pay for it? How you going to pay for it? Okay, it being, okay, of course, Medicare for all. And Raymond Lowy is here from state of Minnesota. Thank you for coming, Raymond. Nice to see you. It's always nice to see Minnesotans. Okay, Lana, of course, Kay is in Minnesota as well. Okay, in Minneapolis, I guess, so very close to Minneapolis. Okay, what Bernie's strategy had been was to say, look, we're going to pay for it. We're paying for it now. We'll pay for every dollar of it. And he would give his guarantee that he would do that, but he would not say how. He would not actually throw a plan out there. Okay, and when they continued to press him concerning a plan, he would come back with statements. Well, why don't you ask the Trump administration how it's going to pay for the Defense Department? Okay, or other people who are advocating for military spending say how they're going to pay for that. Why is it you never ask those people how they're going to pay for things, but whenever progressives want to do something for the American people, you ask us how you're going to pay for it? I mean, we've spent on wars in the Middle East, what now, $4 trillion, $5 trillion, $6 trillion? And you never asked anywhere along the line how you're going to pay for it. And so that's been Bernie's line. And he's refused to say how he was going to pay for it, except that he would. Hi, Steve Day. Nice to see you. So, what Warren did was to depart from that strategy. Okay, and to outline how she was going to pay for it in some detail. But of course, she had to start from some kind of baseline of how much it was going to cost if it wasn't actually paid for. And what she did is took the estimate of the Urban Institute as to how much a Medicare for All program would cost over 10 years. Hi, Gary Houck. And she said, okay, when she talked to the Urban Institute, what they told her is, well, this is going to cost $59 trillion. And when we think about the changes that you're going to make in implementing the Medicare for All program, then we think you're going to save $7 trillion. So now you only have to tell us how you're going to pay for the remaining $52 trillion. That's what she started out to do. And eventually, by saying, well, we're going to pay for this and we're going to pay for that, and the other thing, we're going to save money here and we're going to do this, can't do that. She came to the idea that it was going to cost $20.5 trillion. The Urban Institute consultants told her it was going to cost her $20.5 trillion more than the federal government was already spending now on healthcare spending. And so then she went about specifying proposals for how the 20.5 trillion in revenue would be raised. And this got her into all kinds of trouble. Got her into trouble from the right, who said, this is totally unrealistic. You're never going to raise that much in taxes. It's never going to happen. That's just never going to be passed by the Congress. And also from the left, who started saying things like, why are you saying it's going to cost $59 trillion, $34 trillion more than is being spent by the government right now? That's ridiculous. And then people on the left are also saying, why are you specifying the revenue raising kinds of measures that you're proposing? In particular, what you call a premium that the employers will have to pay for each of the individuals they employ is a head tax. It's a head tax on people. It's nothing else. And it's very regressive. It's better just to concede that it's going to be necessary to have a higher payroll tax. You're just going to have to agree with Bernie that there will have to be higher taxes on the middle class. There's no way out of it. But nevertheless, even though the taxes will be higher, they will be progressive taxes, okay, or more progressive taxes. They will be taxes that the businesses won't be able to evade. And furthermore, they won't cost people as much as they'll save through the Medicare for All program. So they'll be a lot better off. So that's the criticisms she was getting actually from the left. So the question is, has Warren made a really big mistake in her approach? Well, it seems to me that she certainly has. So now I want to shift over to some articles that I'm going to review and comment on, which ought to begin to make clear that she really did make a big mistake. Oops, I got the wrong window. So let me go to the right window with the first article I want to cover in it. This is an article that appeared in Jacobin yesterday. And very aptly, it's entitled, Warren is Jeopardizing Our Fight for Medicare for All, and it was written by Tim Higginbotham. And Tim says, I'll clean out some of the extraneous matter here so you can see better. Tim says, The question of how to pay for Medicare for all has always irked single-payer advocates, mostly because we've always known that paying for it is easy. The U.S. is the wealthiest country on earth. We're spending far more now than we would be under Medicare for all. The real obstacle is not the cost, as those immersed in the fight for a single payer understand very well. But the battle we'll need to wage against insurance companies, drug companies, and the political establishment in order to take public control over what's rightfully ours. So the real obstacle is not the cost, it's the battle that we're going to need to fight. And by the way, that's what Bernie was doing over the weekend. He was fighting that battle. And very well, thank you. Anyway, Tim goes on, check the news, however, and you'd think the only reason we haven't yet won Medicare for all is that nobody has figured out how to finance it. Media outlets frequently repeat various political attacks on Medicare for all's costs while ignoring all firm evidence about its benefits and inevitable savings. The question has gotten far more play in presidential debates than any concern about the insane profits of insurance and pharmaceutical companies or the political establishment's effort to bait and switch on the promise of universal care by rallying around watered-down initiatives. Yeah, they've been doing bait and switch now for more than 10 years, since 2009. Anyway, when they pulled a bait and switch with the public option on us and failed to pass a single-payer bill back then. H.R. 676 was around back then. They could have passed it back then. Anyway, Tim says, this narrative is completely wrong. Detailed economic studies have demonstrated a variety of options to fund the program through stable, progressive taxes while saving the vast majority of people money by eliminating all premiums and out-of-pocket spending. That is, all copays and all deductibles. The media has happily amplified lies and bogus talking points about affordability and taxes to create a problem that quite simply isn't there. It certainly isn't. So nevertheless, Elizabeth Warren bowed to this line of attack and focused her policy team's efforts on attempting to come up with a financing plan that fulfills her impossible promise to not raise middle-class taxes, quote, 1 penny, unquote. Well, by the way, it's not really an impossible promise. She could avoid raising middle-class taxes by 1 penny if she was willing to deficit spend some part of the Medicare for all bill. In other words, let's say she was willing to spend she was willing to deficit spend $1 trillion per year over 10 years. That would cover $10 trillion of the bill. And the rest could probably be paid for in a variety of other ways that she and Bernie have already specified. So, it is her notion that she has to be politically responsible, that the only responsible thing to do to pay for anything is to use tax revenues. That's what's holding her back. She won't use the monetary sovereignty of the United States to pay for any part of that spending. Instead, she won't raise middle-class taxes 1 penny, but she will raise the employer premiums by $9,800 per head, creating a really terrible situation, which we'll be getting to presently. She finally released the plan on Friday. The result, a jumbled, very politically difficult and possibly unworkable approach that serves more as a reaction to criticism than a plan for actually achieving single-payer health care. Not just a reaction to criticism, but also a desire to get one up on Bernie Sanders. It was always said, in order to pay for this, the middle class is going to have to pay somewhat more, but they'll still save a huge amount of money under my plan. Kim goes on. And he says, okay, Medicare for All policy is plainly realistic in terms of sheer policy and numbers. There are no wonky details to work out to prove it is doable. The only candidate who seems to understand this and to understand the massive fight winning Medicare for All will require is Bernie Sanders. His approach for decades now has been to emphasize the program's obvious affordability without getting suckered into debates about misguided policy questions, all the while rallying the working class majority, I said the working class majority against the powerful interests standing in our way. He goes on and says, okay, Medicare for All is an urgent necessity. At least 87 million people are uninsured or underinsured, while tens of thousands die each year due to the inability to afford necessary care. As such, we need a shovel-ready plan that can be won. In 2021, a president who will fight for it right off the bat. And lastly, financing methods that will prove politically popular and stable. And he points out Warren's plan comes up short on all these counts. First, let's look at its financing methods. He points out nearly 2/3 of the funds needed for Medicare for All already exists in current state and federal health care spending through Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, and the hundreds of billions in subsidies the government currently pays to private insurers. This is true. According to CMS, the government currently covers 66% of the nation's annual health care spending. Numbers like this have been going on for some time, even back in 2015, 2014, 2013. That number was up to 64%, and then up to 65%, and now it's around 66%. Okay, in another year, it's due to go up to 67%. Warren acknowledges all of this, getting her most of the way there. She then applies taxes on the rich, quadrupling her sloganeered, quote, 2 cents on the dollar, unquote, tax on billionaires to 8 cents on the dollar. This is good, as is Warren's correct argument that switching to Medicare for All will result in substantial administrative savings. Yes, she is quite right about that. But in trying so hard to avoid direct taxes on the middle class, Warren's team decided against the straightforward payroll tax in favor of a flat head tax on employers. And Matt Brunig of the crowdfunded think tank People's Policy Project calls this approach, quote, bad and unworkable. Instead of taxing a certain percentage of employees' pay, as happens under a payroll tax, Warren's head tax would charge employers a flat amount, no matter the employee's salary. Seeing as any employer-side tax ultimately comes out of workers' potential earnings, this is a regressive approach that would disproportionately impact low and middle income workers. Moreover, Warren's head tax would exempt employers who classify their workers as independent contractors, as well as businesses with fewer than 50 employees. This would encourage employers to reclassify employees and divide up their firms to avoid the tax, which would then require a larger tax to maintain revenue. This could potentially result in, as Brunig says, quote, a death spiral, unquote, for the program. Warren's remaining financing methods bring us to the biggest problem with her plan: its clear lack of urgency. This point is right on. Warren argues that her plan for comprehensive immigration reform could free up $400 billion that she could use for Medicare for All over 10 years, while cutting the dangerous military slush fund will free up another $798 billion. And then Tim points out, on their own, these are important goals. But using political fights like these to cobble together funding for Medicare for All is a fairly good tell that Warren's plan is not designed to be implemented anytime soon. Maybe that's why she's talking about a long transition period. This is further evidenced by the language in Warren's Medium post about her plan. She describes Medicare for All as a, quote, long-term, unquote, goal 7 times, while couching the rest of the post in similar language, such as saying she wants to move to a Medicare for All system eventually, quote, unquote. As my grandmother used to say, we will see it all on the golden bridge to heaven. There's a lot to be said for Bernie Sanders' consistent Medicare for All advocacy. But one of the most important things to note is that he never describes Medicare for All as a long-term goal. No, he never does. But he does have a 4-year transition period, which in my view is completely unnecessary. And he did it to get co-sponsors in the Senate. But I think when he becomes the president, that one of the first things that's going to go is that 4-year transition period. It's at least going to be taken down to 2 years and maybe less. After all, we've already had that transition period. In fact, since we set out on this journey to reform healthcare seriously, which was in 2009, we've had a 10-year transition. And we're nowhere near Medicare for All yet. I think this idea of a transition period is really somewhat ridiculous, but that's a subject for another day. As Warren acknowledges, we can get most of the way toward paying for Medicare for All simply by transferring current public health spending, getting rid of private insurance subsidies, adding direct wealth taxes, and through administrative savings. The rest will require some form of taxation, direct or indirect, on the middle class. We should not hide from this, as it will lower middle-class spending overall. Dependable payroll taxes have allowed Social Security to remain relatively durable all these decades, while general taxation has made the National Health Service the UK's most politically popular institution. Well, that said, Social Security has taken some very serious hits lately from the faux fiscal responsibility advocates, from the deficit hawks, from the terrorists over the deficit, and the National Health Service has taken really big hits under the conservatives since they came into power again in 2010. And it was even starved a bit before that, when Labor was running it, because Labor had turned into a neoliberal party at that time, and is only now getting out of that particular funk. So, the general taxation, to me, doesn't work as well as educating people about where money actually comes from, both in the UK and here. That can be much more effective, especially if demonstrations of how to fund that way are made by the central governments, as they could easily be here in the United States through overt congressional financing or through using platinum coin seigniorage. Anyway, going on. Tim says, we can easily pay for Medicare for all. Let's reject the premise that financing it is our main fight. Very correct about that. Warren's rush to release a financing plan accentuates a key distinction between her and Sanders. Warren is technocratic, proud of having a, quote, plan for everything, unquote. Quick to assure supporters that once she sorts the numbers out, she can bring, quote, big structural change, unquote. Such an approach keeps policy firmly in the hands of the mystifiers, the wonks of corporate-funded think tanks who persuade voters that, if trusted with power, they will solve all our problems with no need for all that angry talk of revolution. It is worth noting that the Center for American Progress, a notorious opponent of single-payer health care, is showing sudden enthusiasm for Warren's plan. And there's a link there probably to Neera Tanden or or someone like that. But the point being that what Warren did exactly is to get her estimates. She went to the wonks at the Urban Institute, and she went to Don Berwick and Simon Johnson, two other very wonky people who had worked for the Peterson Institute of International Economics in Simon Johnson's case, and in Berwick's case, who had worked for the Obama administration for a while, I believe, as the head of CMS. Sanders, to go on with the article, on the other hand, promises to serve as organizer-in-chief. He emphasizes political revolution, which he describes as millions of working people standing up to industries and billionaires, with politicians eager to bring their fight to the halls of power. While he's released a number of tax options to fund Medicare for all and has been honest, unlike Warren, that it would require some form of general tax hike while still saving people money overall, Sanders has hand-waved on the media queries as to whether he'll release an itemized plan like Warren, saying simply, quote, I don't think I have to do that right now, unquote. I disagree, of course, that some form of general tax hike will be necessary, at least any tax hikes for the middle class. And it's for the reason I said before. We could set out at the start to deficit spend a part of the cost, of the Medicare for All program. We could also recognize at the start that a $59 trillion estimate for its cost is absolutely ridiculous, and that a much more defensible estimate is in the range of probably, anywhere from $35 trillion to $42 trillion. But depending on how you assess certain things, certain possibilities, what we do know is that the experience of other nations tells us that the 66% of total health expenditures that we're spending right now, which comes to 12% of our GDP at the present time, ought to be enough to pay for Medicare for all. We know this from the OECD statistics. which show that on the average, the OECD nations having programs and in many cases are similar to Medicare for All are averaging 10% of GDP. And Canada, our nearest neighbor to the north, is spending 11% of GDP. So, excuse me a second. So 12% ought to be plenty for us. Now, we may not get down to 12% of GDP because of the transition period, if there is to be a transition period. It may take 2 or 3 years for us to hit the 12% figure. But even from the first year, we should be able to get down to 16%. And by the end of the second year, we should be able to get down to 13 or 14%. Now, of course, we won't get down to 12% if Bernie insists on a 4-year transition. But if he goes with the Jayapal bill and a 2-year transition, he'll be able to get down to 12% by the third year. So, that's going to be a hell of a lot less money than the $59 trillion Urban Institute is estimating based on its simulation models containing highly questionable assumptions. Going on, quote, "In refused to take the bait on the bogus, quote, how do we pay for it, unquote, question, Sanders remains focused on the real obstacles to victory. He takes every opportunity given to him to straightforwardly explain how Medicare for All will benefit Americans, unlike Warren, who really mentions it in her stump speech, unquote. Doesn't mention it too much on her website either, while pointing his finger straight at those who have financial and power-based interest in defeating his plan. Put simply, Sanders is correct that winning Medicare for All requires a political revolution, not wonky pay-fors. With him in the White House, we have a fighting chance. With Warren, we shouldn't hold our breath. Yes, we shouldn't hold our breath because it's going to be quite a few years if she uses her pay-for plan. And we're going to have to fight her every step of the way if she gets to be president to shorten the kind of time she's now conceptualizing. Let's face it, Warren is not really for Medicare for All. She'd be perfectly happy to have some adjustment to the Affordable Care Act, I believe. And I think that Tim, the author of this article, seems to agree. He expects her to take years and years before we ever see her Medicare for All program, if we ever do. So, let's go to the next article here. This one's entitled, We Have a Better Way. Sanders says his plan to finance Medicare for All much more progressive than Warren's. And this appeared yesterday also. And that was the answer of the Sanders campaign. I mean, that was the answer. The article is by Jake Johnson, a staff writer, at Common Dreams. Let me go to Clearly here so you can not be distracted by all of the the other stuff on the website. We'll get to the text. Bernie said Sunday that his plan to finance Medicare for all is, quote, much more progressive, unquote, than the pay-for released last week by his 2020 Democratic presidential rival, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who called for a head tax on employers and new levies on the wealthy as key parts of her proposal to fund the comprehensive single-payer system. In an interview with ABC News, Sanders warned that Warren's proposed head tax, which she terms an, quote, employer Medicare contribution, unquote, could harm workers' wages and suppress job growth. Quote, I think the approach that I have, in fact, will be much more progressive in terms of protecting the financial well-being of middle-income families, unquote. End quote again. I think that would probably have a very negative impact on creating those jobs or providing wages, increased wages, and benefits for those workers, unquote. He said, end quote again, so I think we have a better way, which is a 7.5% payroll tax, which is far more than far more, I think, progressive, because it'll not impact employers of low workers, but hit of low wage workers, but hit significantly employers, okay, of upper income people, unquote. So Bernie is very right about that. Consider what happens when you have the $9,500 head tax, which is getting employed, okay, to all workers. Couple that with a $15 an hour minimum wage, something like that, or even a $20 an hour minimum wage. So your minimum by worker is getting $20 an hour, which is roughly what, $42,000 a year. $9,800 on that worker increases the size of the wage, in effect, by 25%. But for a high wage worker, say one who makes $150,000, there the head tax is only about 7 or 8%. So, what business people will do is they will try their best not to hire low-wage workers for fear they'll be hit with the head tax. They'll try to hire low-wage workers as private contractors. They'll try to use other devices to avoid hiring the low-wage workers. They may resort to a higher number of hours, forcing low-wage workers to work 50 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. It's nice that they would have the overtime, but it's not so nice if they're forced to put in the overtime. So, going on with the article, quote, the function of healthcare is to provide healthcare to all people, not to make $100 billion in profits for insurance companies and the drug companies, said Bernie. Quote again, so Warren and I agree on that. We do disagree on how you fund it. I think the approach that I have, in fact, will be much more progressive in terms of protecting the financial well-being of our middle-income families, unquote. Okay, Bernie, at the time of passage of the Medicare for All Act of 2019 in the Senate, had a number of options for how to pay for it he put forward. He did not at that time commit to any one of the options, but he did propose one of the options was a payroll tax of 7.5% on employers that would exempt the first 2 million in payroll in order to protect small businesses. On Friday, Matt on Friday, Brunig of the left-wing People's Policy Project think tank similarly argued that a payroll tax would be significantly more progressive than Warren's proposed head tax. Bernie may have a different vision of how to pay for it, but let's be really clear. Bernie and I are headed in exactly the same direction, said Warren. It may seem that that's the case, but if you're getting there as slowly as Warren seems to have in mind, then somewhere along the way, people may forget about the direction that you're traveling in. She says now they're heading in exactly the same direction. And that may be true, but will she have the drive and persistence to continue to head in that particular direction over the very long time that she evidently plans to head there? Quote, under the 8% employer-side payroll tax, the employer taxes paid for a worker earning $15,000 a year is $1,200, while the employer taxes paid for the worker earning $200,000 a year is $16,000, Brunig wrote. Quote, under the $9,500 employer-side head tax, the employer taxes paid is $9,500 for both workers. Sanders' remarks to ABC were his first public comments on Warren's 9,000-word proposal. The Vermont senator said he spoke to Warren on the phone after she released her plan last Friday. Asked about Sanders' criticism of her plan, Warren said Sunday that Bernie may have a different vision of how to pay for it, but let's be really clear, that quote, Bernie and I are heading in exactly the same direction, unquote. And quote again, and that is the $11 trillion that families are going to pay over the next 10 years in out-of-pocket medical costs will go away, said the Massachusetts senator. And quote again, Bernie and I were out there for strengthening America's middle class. I love it, unquote. But she said, well, I don't think she's going to love it for very long. I don't know if she loves it at all, but I think she's getting a lot of static about it. She's not getting a lot of credit for it. There are obviously big holes in her plan, and she's been telling people that she's working on a transition plan. She doesn't have the transplant out yet, but she's working on a transition plan. That transition plan sounds like it's going to be a very, very, very long transition. It's not going to be Bernie's 4-year transition. Sounds like it's going to be an 8-year transition. And what happens if she becomes the president and she's beaten 4 years later? What happens then? I mean, what happens to the other 4 years of her transition plan? Well, maybe she's planning a 10-year transition plan. I think if I'm not mistaken, Harris had a 10-year transition plan too, right? So she's out there joining Harris with it. Okay, maybe it won't be a 10-year transition plan. Maybe it'll only be a 6-year transition plan or a 7-year transition plan, so she can distinguish herself, from Harris. But I'll tell you, when the November debate comes, okay, on November 20th, I think that Tulsi is going to deliver very pronounced attacks, okay, on Warren in relation to her waffling on Medicare for All in this way, and also in relation to her foreign policy ideas. I think Tulsi is just waiting to do it. We just have to see what happens. So, okay, here we are again. And so let me start, okay, by saying that I think this little skirmish between Sanders and Warren, okay, is important because Warren has differentiated herself, okay, from Bernie Sanders by going to the right, okay, by going to the center, and lining up a lot more with the establishment, okay, on Medicare for All. And we see it. Everybody can see she's distinguishing herself from Bernie. And what's Bernie been trying to do the last few weeks? As he's built the current surge he's experiencing in the polls, which the mainstream fails to recognize and will not recognize, but we eventually will convince them that he has had a surge in the polls, a very substantial surge in the polls, and that they're going nowhere but up, okay, right now. But, okay, until we do, what Warren has accomplished is distinguishing herself from him in a way that he likes. He again can say that I am the most progressive of the candidates, without a doubt. Look at her plan with its regressive tax on working people and with its long transition period in order to get to Medicare for All. That will politically distinguish him again from her. People won't be able to continue to say, Bernie and Warren want very, very similar things. They'll say it, but it's going to be less and less convincing. And here's the other shoe falling right now. That other shoe is in relation to the climate emergency. And that's reflected in this article entitled Naomi Klein and youth environmental leaders to join Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez in Iowa for climate crisis summit. That article, again, it's a Common Dreams article, was written by Jake Johnson, and that was from yesterday too, and I will shortly give you clearly on it, but I want you to see this poster. It's a climate crisis summit. It's coming up this Saturday in Des Moines, Iowa, at Drake University Bell Center. Who knows, that might be another basketball arena that fits 14,000 people in it. And who's going to be there? Senator Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and also Naomi Klein, Zena Precht, Rodriguez from the Sunrise Movement, and Isra Hersey, and Stacey Walker, who just endorsed Bernie He's a real important politician, okay, in Iowa. And he just came out with his endorsement, okay, of Bernie Sanders as his choice for president of the United States. And so they're having this climate crisis summit. It's beginning at noon on Saturday, November 9th. So you want to watch for it. Quote, the climate crisis is an international challenge. We're ready to take it on with a Green New Deal. Bernie Sanders, a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, said Monday in a tweet, in order to promote the summit, which is set to take place at Drake University in Des Moines. The event, as Vox reported on Monday, is part of the Sanders campaign's push to win the February 3rd Iowa caucuses with an ambitious climate message and a policy platform. In August, Sanders unveiled a sweeping Green New Deal proposal calling for a 10-year mobilization to transition the U.S. economy to 100% renewable energy while creating 20 million decent-paying union jobs in the process. Senator Bernie Sanders, I'm quoting now from Vox, wants to be the new climate candidate of the 2020 presidential race, and his campaign is betting it can win them Iowa, unquote. So he's going to differentiate himself from Warren in Iowa on Medicare for all. And he's been going around Iowa talking Medicare for all in town halls all over the place, okay, in recent weeks, taking everybody's stories, getting up close and personal with them, and emphasizing all that Medicare for all would do for them. Going on, the youth-led Sunrise Movement tweeted in response to Vox's story that the country has, quote, never seen something like this, unquote. Quote, in 2020, Green New Deal voters could determine who wins the Iowa caucuses and from there the presidency, the group said. In 2020, hashtag Green New Deal voters could determine who wins the Iowa caucuses and from there the presidency. That was the tweet from the Sunrise Movement. The Sanders campaign said in a statement that the summit on Saturday is, quote, set to be one of the largest gatherings in Iowa to confront climate change, unquote. The event will feature national climate leaders like Hersey and Precht Rodriguez, as well as local Iowa activists. Quote, Senator Sanders probably has the most intensive climate plan on the circuit right now, unquote. Hersey told Vox, quote, I think a lot of young people are hearing Sanders' message and waking up, unquote. The only disagreement I have with that is that he has the most intensive climate plan on the circuit right now. There's no doubt about it. It's not, there's nothing probably about it. Quote, the climate crisis is everything, Hersey added. It's healthcare, it's racial justice, it's criminal justice, everything. It's our lives on the line. Lives are already being lost, but because of it. Okay, as Nina Turner says, all we love is on the line. All we love. The day after the Climate Crisis Summit, Sanders plans to go on a, quote, green jobs tour, unquote, across Iowa's conservative 4th congressional district. And Bill Neidhart, the Sanders campaign's deputy state director in Iowa, predicted the Vermont senator's bold climate message will have very broad appeal among Iowa voters. Quote, climate is typically seen as an issue for young voters, but we reject the notion that climate only engages the young voters, he said to Vox. We think, he quote again, we think a strong focus on climate, especially on the economic issues, can really turn the tide, unquote. Now, so do I. I completely agree with that. I completely agree that climate is very, very important. But I also want Bernie, I want him very badly to begin to focus on seniors. He did have some town halls for seniors last weekend, okay, in Iowa. I want him to continue with those, and not only to continue with those, but also to start actively campaigning among seniors. The support he has among seniors is down around 6%. There is no excuse for that. That is only happening because seniors are ignorant about what kinds of savings they can have under Medicare for All. Now, I'm a senior who lives among seniors. I live in a development in Ashburn, Virginia, where my friends and neighbors are seniors. Many of them are over 80. And when I say they don't know what what the Medicare for All bill could mean for them, I'm telling you like it is. That's the truth. They don't know that even as a single person, okay, and also many of the seniors are single by now, because as I see it, most of the husbands here, okay, have died, okay, and some of the wives have died as well. So by far, the majority of people who live in our development are now single seniors. And a lot of them are living on very low Social Security stipends. And they have no idea that the Sanders Medicare for All bill alone will save them $3,500 a year. His Social Security expansion will save them thousands more. His other plans to make life easier for people will benefit them in other ways and save them thousands more. I personally once took the trouble to total up what all of Sanders' programs would save myself and my wife. And I'm not talking about the job guarantee. And I'm telling you, it can go as high as $18,000 a year in savings. It can go that high. What it means for seniors, for many seniors, is that they will no longer need the help of their children. They'll be able to be financially independent again. So many people where I live are getting help from their children. Sometimes it's very, very substantial. It's a burden on their children that people don't want to be. Well, seniors don't understand what his whole agenda, and particularly the Medicare for All bill, but could mean to them. They need to know this. If they become conversant with it, okay, and if they learn about it, there's no way he would stay down at 6% support from seniors. There's absolutely no reason why, if he made the investment and he devoted some more attention to people in the age range from 55 on up, that he couldn't get a majority of those people. He could. He could swamp Joe Biden with those people if they knew the facts of his program. So, I think Bernie has to open up a new front in his campaign war. And that front needs to be the senior front. Because seniors have no interest in learning about what's going on. We have to bring the information to them. There needs to be an active campaign to get seniors involved in Bernie's campaign. Our seniors here do come out to the polls. We have a polling place right across the street, from our development. And we have a bus. And the seniors are bused across the street. They always get to vote. They always get to vote. They always go to the polls. We don't want them voting for Joe Biden. We don't want them voting for Warren. We don't want them voting, God forbid, for Buttigieg. There's no reason for it, except Bernie's campaign hasn't wanted to make the investment in seniors. Anyway, so let me take a look at what you've had to say today. And by the way, please share this. That's not what I wanted. Flash. I wanted to flash my please share, like, and subscribe screen, and ask you to please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. And let me go back to your comments. There's a little delay in how quickly the program works. There it is. I'm back on the screen now. That's good. Here we go. Margaret says, why is everything about dollars instead of doing what's right? Well, it has a lot to do with the media. It has to do with the propaganda in Washington. There are so many think tanks here that are well funded to provide lots and lots, okay, of propaganda concerning how much doing what's right is going to cost and how we can't afford it and how we have to be fiscally responsible. Margaret says the opposition is taking control of the discussion, framing it in their worldview. I think that's what she meant to say. Yeah, worldview, of course. Cheyenne Tiara says Bernie Kratz do it using MMT. Some of us do it using MMT. Unfortunately, not enough of us yet. Wade Bacall joined. Hi, Wade. Nice to see you. Margaret Ames says, even without understanding MMT, it should be a piece of cake to attack the military spending is out of control. It is a piece of cake. Okay? It is out of control. And most of the Bernie Krats are for cutting it in half. That still leaves plenty. $375 billion a year. If you include what's in there for Homeland Security, cuts from $1 trillion to $500 billion. Margaret says, your grandmother was a wise woman. Yeah, she was a wise woman. She had all kinds of wise sayings. She was an immigrant from the Carpathian by Ukraine, which was part of Hungary at that time. It was part of the old empire, and the Hungarian part of the old empire. So she had a lot of old sayings and a lot of old wisdom to impart. And she was a real honey. And she lived with us. We were an extended family. She lived with us until my mother died. I was in college by that time, and the family kind of broke up soon afterwards, and she went to live with my aunt and her family. Cheyenne says Warren helped her daughter co-found a health insurance company. No conflict there. Yeah. And CAP, of course, is the Center for American Progress, CAP. And Louisa Connors joined. Hi, Louisa. Nice to see you. And Steve Wolfbrand has joined. Steve says, hi, Dr. Joe. And also Tanette Landon has joined. Hi, Tanette. How are you? Nice to see you again. Steve says, I love Dr. Joe, love Tulsi. Thank you, Steve. Nana says, Tulsi has plenty of clout on foreign policy, but she backtracked on Medicare for All too, if memory serves me. Well, she kind of backtracked, but whether she backtracked as much as Warren is going to backtrack, I don't know. Shine says Tulsi is winding up her warrior clock. She may be, indeed. Robin says Bernie surge is being dismissed by the corporate media. I know it's being dismissed. They're just not covering it. They're failing to cover it. They're distorting polls. They're reporting things inaccurately. And when they make a correction, they slant the correction. It's ridiculous. They've been doing it now since this surge has started. The question is, will they be able to keep it going until November 20th? And will they be able to keep it going when he smears everybody in the debate on the 20th? Because I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to leave them, well, I think he's going to do very well in the November 20th debate. I will leave it there. He'll make it very clear who the outstanding candidate is in this particular context. And Robin says, I spent at least 2 hours today tweeting all the anchors, and the networks, shaming them. And shaming McCaskill, who again on the Today Show said quote, the people, unquote, don't want, quote, pie in the sky, unquote, ideas, but ones that really affected them. What? She's a corporate hack, yes, a shill, and I tweeted about her dishonesty and what she did to Bernie delegates in 2016. Okay, I'll never forget that. And by the way, she got her comeuppance when she lost her Senate seat, which she never would have lost if she had had the sense to become a Bernie-crat in the first place. Her strategy carried her, well, actually, probably wasn't so bad for her because it carried her right into a more lucrative job for NBC. Funny the way our system works. If you serve the rich and you lose your head for it, they got another good job for you. And Elizabeth Bergen, Netherlands, said, be careful what you wish for. Listen to this explanation of the Green New Deal. Okay, and Liz has a YouTube there for us to look at. I will certainly take a look at it. Thank you for posting it. And Cheyenne says, Lana Tulsi's plan actually provides more coverage. Okay, medical marijuana may be included. It's also going to be included, okay, in Bernie's plan as well. I mean, it's going to be covered. Marijuana, okay, is going to be covered. It's going to be legalized completely by Bernie, and therefore, if a doctor prescribes it, it's going to be covered. Robin says, who the hell is she? And this video is dated January, laugh out loud. Well, I'll be happy to take a look, okay, at the video and see who the hell is she. But I am, of course, very respectful, okay, of Liz, who's a very good person and does good research. And if she is recommending this particular YouTube, there are probably very good reasons for it. How many of you actually know what is in the Green New Deal? Well, I know what was in the resolution. I also know the Green New Deal is not set in stone, but it's an excellent start, and it includes the federal job guarantee. Robin says, see Dr. Joe's video analyses, and also it's better than no Green New Deal. We don't have, okay, a Planet B. Okay, the Green New Deal resolution is different from Bernie's plan that he released, okay, at the end of the summer, which fleshes things out in more detail. Robin says, that a Democrat won the Kentucky governor's race. Looks like Trump's rally last night didn't work so well. Looks like it. And Liz says, it is great if you are in favor of the NWO. Sorry, what's the NWO? I don't recognize, okay, the acronym. Cheyenne says, hope, okay, it's a progressive Dem. In Kentucky, it's probably not a progressive Dem. And does she discuss how she pays for it? So Lana asks, really? And does she discuss how she pays for it? My understanding is she has a problem getting rid of insurance companies. Yeah, that was my understanding too. That she's balking at getting rid of the insurance companies. And Lana says Tulsi is very economically illiterate. That may well be. And Cheyenne says to Liz, relax. Lana says, Tulsi refusing to learn economics and align with some of Yang's policies made me turn away from her. Well, I'm still open-minded towards her because, of course, of her foreign policy chops. And, okay, I do want her voice. I continue to want her voice, okay, in the debates. And I'd like to hear what she has to say on the Medicare for All issue. I doubt I'm going to agree with her. And I certainly don't think she's the candidate for president, okay, that Bernie is. Because I think even on foreign policy, that everywhere she's good, that Bernie is also good. And you can see that if you want to look at the rally, okay, in Minnesota, okay, on Sunday, and you watch the parts where they discussed what's happening to the developing world and what's happening to the immigrants and what's happening to human rights, there's no doubt that Bernie and his main people are going to make very, very big changes in the foreign policy establishment, at least as big as what Tulsi would do. He's not saying specific things right now because that's not what he wants to run on. He wants to run on the domestic programs. But, I mean, I'm telling you, he's going to pardon Assange or at least stop extraditing him straight away. And he's probably going to pardon Snowden and Chelsea Manning as well. I got some new comments here. So Cheyenne says, Lana, I have no interest in a fight about Bernie or Tulsi. Take a breath. Cheyenne says, thanks, Joe. Another good show. Bye for now. Thank you for coming, Cheyenne. And Lana says, back at you. I'm just replying. Lana says, Claire McCaskill is a jerk. I agree. She's worse than a jerk. She's a sellout. And Liz says, Claire McCaskill has been supported by the Kochs. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I just screwed up my comment field. Let me see if I can get rid of that. It relatively appeared. Because right now, here it's back. Great. I'm back. I'm having a little problem with my computer. Lana asks, and Mad Hildebrand has joined. In the 2018 elections, I thought that Mad was a really great candidate. for Congress, and I was very sorry that she was beaten in the primary by a candidate with money who didn't have anything else going for her except for her name, and her money. And Lana says, I'm sure you'll give a fair critique. Lana also says, didn't you do a long video on the Green New Deal? Yes, I did do a long video on the Green New Deal. I did a long video on the resolution that was done, by AOC and Ed Markey. And I believe that I also did a long video on the Sanders plan at the time that he released it, if I recall correctly. Bonnie's shaking her head, yes, I did. And Cheyenne says, Tulsi knows MNT. She's a fellow at the Sanders Institute. That doesn't mean she knows MNT. I don't know to what extent she's talked, to any of the MNTers. There's no hint in any speeches of hers that I've seen, and I've seen a number of them, or any town halls, that she knows MMT. No hint, at all. So Solana says, I'm sorry she won't be campaigning to keep her seat in the House, of Representatives. Yes, I'm very sorry about that, too. I'm sure that the primary competitor she's got right now won't be an improvement. I think the establishment has put up a centrist for that seat, and we really needed to have Tulsi in the House. Of course, her endorsement this time will mean a lot to Bernie, as it did, in the last election. Maybe she thinks she'll be moving on into a Bernie administration. It could very well happen. Cheyenne says Bernie Tulsi is the best ticket to beat Trump. Lana says, I didn't realize that we were fighting. Cheyenne says Claire is a sicko. Well, she's certainly a sycophant. She's a Hillary sycophant. And Dale, sorry, I couldn't resist it. Dale Weaver has joined. Oh, I'm getting some hearts for that one. How nice. And Lana says, I have begged Cullen Tiernan, her campaign staff, to get her an actual PhD economic advisor. So far, no real response. Very frustrating. Well, if she wants, an economic advisor, then you can volunteer my services. I'd be happy to be her economic advisor on MMT if she wants one. And Cheyenne correctly says using the word MMT will kill anyone's campaign. Bernie doesn't use it either. Yes, I agree, but there are little hints in stuff that Bernie has put out that indicate that he knows about MMT, and that even his responses to the mainstream have been greatly affected by the framing that has been put on it by Stephanie. Mm-hmm. So I know that Bernie knows MMT. but I don't have any evidence, okay, that but Tulsi knows it, and I sure would like to have some. Anyway, any more comments? Because it's getting to be the witching hour for me. And thank you all for coming. Please share this. Share, like, and subscribe as soon as the YouTube video goes up. And please do consider coming to my Patreon page and making a monthly contribution. Even $1 a month can make a difference. Okay, and Lana says, I wouldn't say the only one, but she definitely has moxie. Ilhan Omar is damned outspoken too. She is. And AOC can be as well. And Rashida. Don't forget Rashida. Giant says Stephanie and Tulsi were part of the same. I know. And met for a week in Vermont, summer of 2015. All these things were discussed. Cheyenne, that is very good to know. That is the first evidence that I've heard that Tulsi and Stephanie were in contact for any appreciable length of time, for a long enough time that they might have had a lunch or two together where these things were discussed. So thank you for the information. I appreciate knowing that. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Bonnie's in here now sitting with me.
I'm going to get you a red shirt.
She says she's going to get me a red shirt so I can have something other than a blue shirt. And where is Rob today? He was complaining about my blue shirt yesterday, which was actually a purple shirt, not a blue shirt. He wasn't able to tell the difference. And Lana said, per Tulsi's campaign staffer, she wants to differentiate herself from Bernie. No MMT speak. Lana says red shirts are good. Well, okay, I've got some good red shirts, but they're not these comfortable short sleeve shirts, okay, which are appropriate, okay, for indoors. I do have some red turtlenecks,
We'll have to open the windows.
and I'll certainly wear them as soon as it gets cold in the apartment. Yes, Bonnie said she has to open up the window so that it's cold enough for me to wear a red shirt. I actually tend to favor maroon shirts and red shirts and shirts like that. But just so happens that my short sleeve t-shirts for the summer are not red.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Red shirts are good, but red hats are not so good. Amani says I should show my green screen again. Okay? One green screen coming up. So there's my Patreon account again, patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. So there we go. Atlanta says green is good too. Dale says the blue shirts are fine. Yeah, okay. A long time ago, I did some research on some basic sort of psychological predispositions. Okay, specifically three psychological needs that people have. They were the need for affiliation, the need for achievement, and the need for power. And I did some simulation and gaming experiments with a colleague who was the principal investigator on the project. And we published, some things off that. But the reason why I'm bringing that up now is because the color most often associated with need for achievement, people, is blue. It's blue. And the color most often associated with need for power, people, is red. So I just thought I'd fill you in on that little piece of knowledge emerging from psychology.
You'll have to change your screen to blue.
I think what I need is a green screen because I can impose things on the green screen.
Yeah.
Dale says, LOL. Hey, Dale, I thought you were going to catch up later. Anyway, glad you're here. And thank you for posting the link to my Patreon page. That's very helpful. And Liz says, many of the MMT cheerleaders have been very off-putting. They act like MMT is God's answer for every problem. And if you don't preach it, you are going to hell. They make it seem like the best religion in the world. Okay, I'm sorry, Liz. I know that there have been certain people who have been in their preaching, of MMT, fairly preachy. I hope that I have not been among the really preachy types. Okay, it seems to me that, at least I try, to interact well with people who do not agree with the MMTers. Okay, specifically the people from the Green Party, who are anti MMT, continuously say to me that I'm the only MMTer they respect. Okay, Dolores, thank you for coming. Okay, and good night to you. And on that note, I think I'll say hi to Antonio Calhow, who just has joined. Cheyenne says, there are fanatics everywhere. Don't blame MMT for that. Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's true. I like to think that I'm open-minded, about MMT. That doesn't mean that I don't strongly adhere to it, because I do. I mean, after all, I've written 7 ebooks on the subject. So I love MMT, but I don't think I'm a fanatic about it. I am, in philosophy, a critical rationalist. And that means that I try to be open-minded, okay, about everything, especially in discussions, okay, with others. But when it comes to argument, I'm no patsy. So Liz says, not you, sweet man. I love the way you read that. So funny. I laugh out loud. And Antonio says, you are more the conversational type. Thank you, Antonio. And he says, hi, Joseph M. Firestone. Cheyenne says, adios. Hasta la vista, Cheyenne. And Liz says, they are right. You are a good MMTer. Well, thank you, Liz. And Cheyenne says, happy Indigenous Peoples Month. Happy Indigenous Peoples Month. Okay, indeed. Maybe we should have some Happy Indigenous Peoples Years. Kind of long overdue. We need a lot of that here in the United States. Lana says, I think you are a patient spider. Oh. Sharon Anthony Connors has joined. Well, Sharon Anthony, we've been having a delightful conversation here, but I have a busy schedule this week. I have a very busy Thursday coming up, and I have another live stream coming tomorrow. And I also have to be somewhere in the early part, okay, of the afternoon.
Saturday too.
Oh, Lana says, in argument, I'm a patient spider. So, therefore, I'm going to have to get off because we have to get up real early on Thursday morning, and we have to work our way up to that because we usually get up real late. So, I have a big day coming Thursday. I'll be busy the whole day, and I have a live stream Thursday night too. Sharon Anthony Connors asks, Joe, did you get to read that article? Not yet, Sharon Anthony, but I certainly will. I promise. And thank you for posting it. Okay? And Cheyenne seems to be swinging. Okay, I think that might be Pluto laughing or something, or and Rob has joined and says, hey Yoda, hey Rob, guess what? A blue shirt again. Except last night I had a purple shirt, you didn't notice. And Lana says, good night. And Cheyenne has a picture of a lovely dog. And Lana says good night. Okay, good night, everybody. I am signing off now.